Good morning, everyone. We have two readings from John 4. The first reading is verses 4 to 9. But he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a Samaritan city called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired out by his journey, was sitting by the well. It was about noon. A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." His disciples had gone to the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria?" Jews do not share things in common with Samaritans. And verses 27 to 42. Just then his disciples came. They were astonished that he was speaking with a woman, but no one said, "What do you want?" or "Why are you speaking with her?" Then the woman left her water jar and went back to the city. She said to the people, "Come and see a man who told me everything I have ever done. He cannot be the Messiah, can he?" They left the city and were on their way to him. Meanwhile, the disciples were urging him, "Rabbi, eat something." But he said to them, "I have food to eat that you do not know about." So the disciples said to one another, "Surely no one has brought him something to eat." Jesus said to them, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to complete his work. Do you not say, 4 months more, then comes the harvest? But I tell you, look around you and see how the fields are ripe for harvesting. The reaper is already receiving wages and is gathering fruit for eternal life, so that sower and reaper may rejoice together. For here the saying holds true, one sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap that for which you did not labor. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labor." Many Samaritans from that city believed in him because of the woman's testimony. "He told me everything I have ever done." So when the Samaritans came to him, they asked him to stay with them, and he stayed there for 2 days, and many more believed because of his word. They said to the woman, "It is no longer because of what you said that we believe, for we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this is truly the Saviour of the world."
Thank you, Hayley. Lord, don't let me get in the way of whatever you want to say through this passage. So, first slide. Beautiful. Today is the second last week where we are looking at being witnesses of God's love. Micah opened proceedings introducing us to the idea of chesed, steadfast, loving faithfulness, and if you excuse me for putting my spin on it, there's something about the steadfastness of that loving faithfulness which is like integrity, where we act in alignment with God's loving intentions for us and the world. Then Steve Frost, week 2, challenged us to stop ignoring Jesus' instructions for us to love our enemies. And not just our enemies, but our neighbours, the poor, ourselves and creation, and to remind ourselves that when Jesus instructed us to be perfect, as God is perfect, he actually meant it. And we can't just skip past it and pretend that he didn't say it, because it's not achievable. Then last week I was in Canberra for a wedding, but Hayley preached on 3 stumbling blocks that undermine our witness and 3 corresponding remedies. Stumbling block 1, judgmentalism, and remedy 1, an inclusive welcome and hospitality. Stumbling block 2, we are anti-fun. And remedy 2 is witnessing through joy. Stumbling block 3, hypocrisy. And remedy 3, repentance and apology and inclusive love. And all 3 of these sermons are really worth revisiting, and they pretty much say everything that needs to be said. so I'll just finish now. So I thought, what am I going to do? I thought, well, a case study might be helpful. So this week I've gone back to the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman, because here we find a case study of what it means to witness to the love of God and what it looks like when it happens. The Samaritan woman is an inappropriate woman for Jesus to be talking to, a rejected category at the time, and excluded in many ways from society. So before I go any further, let me acknowledge that in God's design, the Aboriginal people were the first people in this land, the Wongal people of the Eora Nation, and the Darug and Eora language groups. And I want to acknowledge that Europeans took this land without due process, that this land was never ceded, and we're all beneficiaries today of that act of colonisation. And the reason that I'm doing it now, when I'm talking about exclusion and marginalisation, is because we've excluded and marginalised Aboriginal people when we came and colonised this land. So, I've been a follower of Jesus since I was 18. I was forced to go to church before that. I like to think that there is some evidence that my belief in Jesus has shaped my life and actions. But as I prepared this sermon, I was again confronted with the reality that I fall far short of the standards that Jesus sets. I cannot imagine being perfect as God is perfect. So I just hope that God can use my failures and shortfalls anyway. God is very real to me, and it's my belief in God that sustains me when I see the church not living out God's love in the world. It astounds me that so many Christians seem to think that being saved by grace through no merit of their own gives them the right to judge or reject some other categories of people. I don't know for a fact, but I'm quite confident that many Christians marched last week reclaiming Australia and complaining about mass immigration. Next slide, please. So the story of Jesus talking with the Samaritan woman is pretty well known. Like I said, she's an inappropriate woman for Jesus to be talking to. So I looked for an inappropriate woman image on the internet. And there are many. But I needed an inappropriate image that was still appropriate enough to be displayed in church. And this is what I chose. The Samaritan woman said to him, and now because it's our tradition at Ashfield Baptist Church not to coordinate the versions of the Bible that we are using. So you've heard this passage from the New Revised Standard Version, which is my preferred version, to be fair, but I've got the NIV in front of us now. So, you're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews did not associate with Samaritans. So the standard interpretation of this passage is pretty well known, I think. Jesus sees a sinful woman who's so rejected by her society that she has to come in the heat of the day to the well by herself to avoid the gossip. A woman with many failed relationships, and Jesus forgives her for everything, and she is so excited to be forgiven for her sins that she rushes off to tell everybody in her community, and in response they believe in Jesus' happy ending. And I really don't think it's a very good interpretation. I mean, Jesus goes out of his way to connect with lots of inappropriate people. Rejected categories of people, people that we exclude from society, and certainly exclude from the faith, from the religious life of our society. people who saw themselves as failures. In this case, Jesus goes out of his way to connect with someone totally inappropriate. And this woman embodies at least 3 excluded, rejected categories or identities, and I won't talk about intersectionality. First, next slide, she is a Samaritan. When we hear Samaritan, we often hear it with the word good in front of it, because Jesus made up a story where a Samaritan was the hero. He chose the Samaritan for that story, the Good Samaritan, because it was so unthinkable that a Samaritan would be the hero of a Jewish story. Samaritans were loathed by Jews, and the feelings were reciprocated. They were rejected and excluded. Jews and Samaritans did not associate with each other. When Jesus talks to the woman, she's not just surprised, she is shocked. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you even be talking to me right now? This doesn't happen." It was unthinkable. Never mind, how can you be talking to me? Don't jump the gun, Ruth. Because I always forget to move the slides forward when I'm doing it myself. So I'm using an AI slide person called Ruth. Never mind, how can you actually offer to put yourself in my debt by asking me to do a favour for you? This was a transaction. Please do this for me, I will be in your debt. It couldn't happen. Now? Apart from being a Samaritan, she's a woman. This is a culture where women are property, under the protection of their father or their husband. There is no respectable way for an unrelated man to interact with someone else's woman. So have I missed a slide? Can we go back? I'm not up to that yet. Next slide, the slide back. Yeah, that one. Sorry, yes. So the disciples come back and they're surprised, shocked, stunned to find him talking with a woman. So just the other day, there was a terrible earthquake and hundreds, maybe thousands of people killed in eastern Afghanistan. In yesterday's Sydney Morning Herald, there's a story about the rescue parties going in, and the rescue parties were all male, so they didn't rescue women because they couldn't touch them. Right? Very similar culture under the Taliban. They pulled the men and the women out of the rubble and gave them medical care, but the women had to wait for other women to come and rescue them. If they found a female corpse, they pulled her out by her clothing because they couldn't touch her skin. That's the culture, right? And we sit here going, that's terrible. But in our own denomination, we discriminate against women. We'll train them for the ministry, but then congregations don't necessarily want to have a woman leading them. It's just a matter of degree, right? Something strange going on. These are the social rules that were in place in the time of Jesus, and we're still shaped by them today. Next slide now. Here's my woman with her 5 husbands. So she's not only a Samaritan and a woman, so it's pretty bad, right? You shouldn't have laughed, James. Sorry. She's also a woman with a reputation. A sinner, spectacularly sinful by the standards of the day. So Jesus tells her to go get her husband and come back, and he knows she doesn't have a husband. And he says, "Yeah, right, when you say that. You've had 5, and the guy you're with now is not your husband. What you've said is quite true." And It's not made explicit in the text, but we can tell from the way this plays out. Because like what we get in the text is basically a bare bones record of a conversation that's recreated after the fact. But it's quite clear that Jesus communicated something else to her. And that is that her previous failed relationships, her current immoral relationship, did not diminish her in any way in his eyes. Jesus cuts through the gossip and the bigotry, her reputation, the judgmentalism of her community. He's looking at a human being made in the glorious image of God. He sees her the way God intended her to be, not a sinner but a saint, not a failure but a leader, not a Samaritan to be looked down upon, not a woman to be ignored, but perhaps the first evangelist, the God-selected apostle to the future disciple community in Samaria, that she founds when she returns to her people and tells them about Jesus. The author of John's Gospel may not have known her name, but Jesus did. God does, and her name is famous and well known in heaven. It was scandalous that Jesus even acknowledged her presence. But here's the thing, Jesus did not care. It's not even that Jesus didn't care. It's more that he didn't even bother to consider for an instant that it might be an issue. He so didn't care what other people thought. He only cared about what God thought and what the woman in front of him thought. That was all that mattered. That's a story worth telling, a story to witness and to testify to. And imagine if we were like that, because I know I'm not. When I was in my 30s, I worked for the Uniting Church Board of Mission. We had these nice work cars and we had to keep them serviced. And I see Tina going, that's a strange segue. And so my car was booked in for a service in Darlinghurst. And it was booked in for 8 a.m, so at 7:45, before the invention of Google Maps, what were those? Was it a UBD? Yeah, big fat book. Gregory's, so one of those. I'm driving down William Street and I turn into the street that the dealer is on, looking for the service centre, and I find I'm on the wrong side of William Street. So I pull over, get out the Gregory's, and a woman gets into my car. For newcomers, James is the person who sort of acts out larger than life what we're all sort of slowly processing. A young, scantily clad woman, probably young enough to be my daughter, even then. And I could see that she was an addict. And when she saw that I was shocked and that this was not what I'd been intending, she was embarrassed. And she offered to help me work out the best route to get to the other side of William Street. And I just wanted to get her out of my car. Because I worked for the church, and I could imagine a police person coming along and having to explain to her, my employer, that I wasn't soliciting, that I was just trying to find my way. And she got out and I went and I turned around, and when I came back she was getting into a combi, before 8 o'clock in the morning. And to this day I am ashamed that I was more worried about what people might think than about her welfare. Because Jesus never gave a crap what other people thought. So here we are. Next slide. You'll recognise this. I stole it off our website. This is the only image that I didn't get copyright permission for, so I hope that's okay. We are a church in a highly multicultural suburb. At a time when thousands of Australians think it's a good idea to go marching as we blame immigrants for the problems caused by the greed of wealthy Australians. At a time when not that long ago our federal Labor government reduced its international student intake as a way to fix the housing crisis. Totally, just unthinkably stupid. When neo-Nazis feel it's okay now to come out in public and start recruiting, while opportunists like Jacinta Nampijinpa Price is happy to start singling out particular ethnic groups as part of the problem. When we talk about witnessing to the love and inclusion and hospitality and welcome of God, we are not talking about some feel-good theology. We are talking about God's call for us to bear witness and testify and stand up and speak and act in a fearful, divided and judgmental community. So the case study, my woman at the well. What happens when we witness to the love of God? First, we surprise and we shock the insiders. We offend people. The disciples return and were surprised to find him talking to a woman. Then, leaving her jar of water, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, "Come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah?" So the second thing that happens is we recruit new leaders, outsiders who are more talented than we are and better preachers than we are and know how to share the gospel because they've experienced it firsthand just a minute ago. And then we ourselves are nurtured. You know, when the disciples come back to him and say, "Rabbi, eat something," and he says, "I have food to eat that you know nothing about." I always imagined that when I was young as like, God's too holy, Jesus doesn't really need food. He was just buzzing because he'd just seen the impact of the gospel in someone's life and seen what a difference it made. He was on a high. We could be like that if we were actually doing it. My food is to do the will of him who sent me. Doing the witnessing to the love of God is a buzz. Makes you feel better about yourself. Makes the world a better place. And then finally, you see the harvest. Many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. And then they invite Jesus to stay for a couple of days, and many more believe. Our job in witnessing to the love of God is not to do all the work, it's to get it started, and then God steps in. Introduce people to Jesus, and Jesus will do the rest. So 2 weeks ago, aware of the anti-immigration marches that were coming and the rise of hate and fear in our community, I wrote a song while we were flying to Cairns, a song which is a prayer that one of these days we will see love. Love for self, for neighbour, for poor, for enemy, all flowing from the love of God that we see in Jesus, the love that overflows and changes communities. So I'm going to play the song now. There'll be a prayer, and then I'm going to go and sit down. To love our neighbours, we will learn to have a difference without envy or fear. At least that's what I pray. One of these days, we will learn to look in mirrors and accept our quirks and limits. We'll learn to love what we see. I hope love makes a way. One of these days, before it's too late, one of these precious
to love ourselves. Teach us to love our neighbor. Lord, teach us that we don't need to accumulate more stuff. Lord, help our human race live with less greed and much more grace. May your love overflow and dissolve all our fear and our hate. One of these days. One of these days, when we learn to love different, help us learn to love forgiveness, love what's fair and do what's right. May that be our aim.